We are championing and directing that voice directly into government. You have a pro-house building government. Very, very different to what we had before.
We did a bit of research last year. 14.3 billion has been lost over the last 5 years to people who've been a victim of a rogue builder.
AI can't actually put bricks together and build a house.
Yeah.
It is absolutely the job that AI can't take over.
Hello and welcome to Series 2 of Build Up from the Basement. I'm absolutely delighted to say that we have got Sarah Edwards MP joining us today. She's been an MP since 2023 when she turned over a massive Conservative majority in Tamworth, and she is the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for SME Housebuilders, the first woman to hold that role and the first female MP to join us in the basement. Sarah, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Good. Well, thank you so much for coming. So I want to start with your background first. You've got quite a unique background for someone who's got an interest in small house builders. Can you tell me a bit about your background and how that sort of shaped your sort of zest for house builders and wanting to be the head of that APPG?
Yeah, well, my background is in spatial design. I actually studied at Central St Martin's, which used to be not far from here, just round the corner at Holborn. So I was the sort of last cohort, if you like, to be at the old art school. And so that course was very much a mixture of architecture, spatial design, planning, master planning, and really thinking about how the built environment is constructed and about the conversations that you need to have to make those decisions about what's the future of an area. So how do you decide what history that you keep or reveal, or what is it in the style, the quality of the building? How do you make sure that it's fit for the future? So a lot of it was also about we talk a lot about it now, the net zero goals.
Yeah, yep.
But, studying things like passive house and really understanding how much further you could push the building sort of trade, the environment, and all of the aspects of constructing where we live and our communities. So it was really broad and very interesting.
Yeah.
And it just gave you a lot of scope to sort of explore what types of initiatives can incentivize certain things. So if you wanted more economic activity, or if you wanted more of a creative sector, or if you wanted people to spend more time outside, what is it that you would need to do when you're redesigning, when you're rethinking a place? How do you do that? And what's the best way? So it was a very interesting and sort of different approach. It's slightly less technical than what a lot of people that maybe you normally speak to would have in their background. So it was much more about the sort of concepts behind the sort of the plans and the thinking that goes underneath it.
This is really interesting. What sort of led you to do that? What inspired you to take up that course?
I think it was just trying to think about how I could be both creative and also apply that to something that felt sort of very direct and purposeful. Okay. So I sort of come from an artistic background. I've been to art school before, and I was trying to figure out, well, what should I study? Because there's a lot of different places that you can take your education. And I thought that I wasn't quite an architect technical person. That wasn't maybe where I wanted to focus, but I wanted to be close. But I didn't necessarily want it to be a planner or just an urban designer. And so by going to art school, by going to Central St Martin's, I could do a similar discipline, but have a different approach to it, and something that was sort of much more artistic in some of the ways that it looked at the outcomes, and sort of trying to break down some of the, I guess, traditional ways of approaching particular problems. So I was quite keen to do something that still had a very close relationship to the disciplines that many people study, perhaps coming at it from a slightly different way.
Yeah, really interesting. Okay, I love that. That's such an interesting background. So this particular sector is obviously quite male dominated. Why did you want to be the all-party chair of the SME Housebuilder Group? Why did you want to do that? It's so interesting. Why did you want to champion the sector?
Well, as I said, when I was studying, a lot of what we would look at were the different components of where we live, our built environment, our communities. And obviously housing was really important because we're building houses in many different ways all around the globe. We have obviously a particular vernacular here, but we're having discussions now about what, that different form looks like to respond to various different issues, whether that's skills issues, whether that's, the cost of making bricks. So what else? So we were having those types of discussions and lectures 20 years ago when I was studying.
Okay.
And so what's really interesting is, you can come back around to something later in your life and say, so where are we now then with this? Because I didn't necessarily pursue and go into that discipline throughout the whole of my career, but it's something that sort of gave me a basis to approach and understand the sector. And so I actually was asked to go and speak to a forum of house builders.
Brilliant.
As an MP, it's policy, what do you sort of know about it? And I said, well, look, I'm not coming at it from the technical point. I said, but interestingly, this is my background and this is what interested me most about, how do we make decisions about how we build? How do we respond to our requirement to, respond to the changing climate crisis and the environmental requirements that we should have when we are building our new homes. And so it was after that someone approached me and said, look, we are actually looking for a new chair. And this is the APPG. We have been set up for a few years now. This is the type of thing that we've been campaigning. And I said, well, I'd love to do it because it sounds fascinating. And also because it really does closely align with what we need to be doing. And particularly from a government point of view, getting house building going is absolutely top of the agenda. And so whilst we know, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the sort of challenges and the barriers that are facing the sector, there is a real commitment to make sure that we build those homes and those houses so that people can, whether it is buying their first home or actually dealing with what we know, which is a complete crisis and a breakdown in the social housing provision that so many people need, and who are living in really awful conditions. And so there's a kind of addressing the entire market is a requirement. And there are different people across the house building spectrum, but particularly the interesting side of it being the smaller house builders that do respond to those smaller sites in communities, that they are actually able to do some of the infill work and to do a huge amount more of the building. They used to be responsible for like 40% of house building.
More.
And yet various things have happened over the decades that have made it harder and harder for them to do that, harder to compete, and have really struggled with the challenges around the planning, the length of time it takes. So a lot of that are the things that we analyze. We ask for, real case studies from the SME house builders that are our members. And we've got approximately 300 now who are part of the APPG. They get surveyed, they send us information, we hold round tables. So we're always trying to get their voice across so that we can then in turn feed that through into the government and say, look, here's our information. These are the things that are a challenge. This is what's slowing it down. So can we have a conversation, or are you aware of these things? Because you want to know that they're coupled with their intention is good information, good evidence, and the right support, because everybody actually is on board with this. Nobody's saying we don't like this, we don't want to do it. No, they do. But what they want to be clear about is where the challenges are stopping them from either growing, from being, having their business grow to be able to build more houses than they were. So, can their build schedule improve over, that trajectory of say 2, 3, 4 years? That is what people want to be doing. And so what we are wanting to do is champion their voice so that the government can see they're ready, they're waiting, but these are the things that they would like to see.
So let's talk about some of the things they like to see. I mean, we hear from our members, for example, access to land is really difficult. I think hiring apprentices, really difficult. Obviously with the budget recently, it's quite difficult keeping employees. So what are you hearing are the biggest sort of challenges that are facing them?
Well,
what are they?
Exactly those things.
Really?
The access to land is something that, and the sort of complexity of finding it. So it's that there to date hasn't been sort of a one-stop shop, a central database where you can go on there and say, where's a piece of land? And it sounds like the obvious thing where, well, why isn't it? And part of that is the sort of fragmented approach that's been taken previously, that this is run by councils. Some of those councils are very small. I have a borough council and a district council, for example, in my patch, and they're responsible for those parcels of land. And then above that sits a county council. And so you haven't necessarily got in all parts of the country the same coordinated approach. And so trying to find where you go, what their process is, whether or not they even have a list, those are the types of things that come back in the feedback. So there has been some progress. I mean, what is good is this is recognized by the government, and they're sort of currently running a pilot on this small site sort of aggregator. And that hopefully will show that if land can be identified, if it can be parceled, and then people can say, great, I think I could do that. That's a piece of land that fits my, scale of my business.
Yeah.
I can afford that, or, I can partner with somebody. That's the type of thing that's really going to start to unlock sites that traditionally have, classically been the derelict pieces of land that people see all the time, that make them feel that there isn't investment going on, that, there's this untapped potential. And that sort of feeds into that narrative that people have, rightly so at the moment, of, there's been a lack of investment. They don't feel like their surroundings and their communities, feel as prosperous as they could, because there are so many of these sort of challenges and barriers that are stopping some of that development that is going to bring positive things to their area. New houses, new shops, new complexes, whether that's a multi-use complex that has flats and shops, but those are the things that smaller house builders are able to infill those gaps in a much more agile way than the bigger house builders. So everybody has a part to play, but I think it's trying to make sure that works. So that is being recognized. I think it'd be great to know when that pilot is going to sort of, it would be great to know when it's going to sort of wrap up, and how those findings then will be implemented much more widely. Because certainly the house builders that I talk to, they would like to have pieces of land that are appropriate to the size of their business, but they're more than happy to work alongside other house builders. So it's actually understanding that there is a supportive network there of people saying, well, but we could do this together. But at the moment, that's quite a challenge.
Yes.
And then on the skills piece, we hear a lot about the issue that the whole of the construction sector and it relies on a pipeline. Everything that is to do with creating something, whether that's railways or anything else, you need to have people right from the ground all the way through. And that means you need to have a pipeline of things to be able to create. So you need houses there waiting. You need that coming through. You need to have the right skills. Otherwise, you then end up with this vicious cycle where you can't get those houses built because you don't have enough of the bricklayers, the electricians, the plumbers, the groundworks, and any of the other specialized skills. So it is a problem when people are not looking at the industry and saying, this is something that I want to work in, and getting under the skin, why is that?
So that's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about as well, especially as a woman in this as well. So what can we do to change the perception of the industry? I mean, we did some research at the SMB last year that said less than half of parents would recommend their child after GCSE take up a career in construction. So what is it about the construction? Mike Reeder came in and said, the Navy, they have that really cool advert that really makes it appealing to join. It looks really dangerous and fun and, adventurous. Is it as simple as, marketing it better? What can be done to make the construction sector appealing to parents and children as a career?
I think it's a really good question, because I don't think it's from lack of people trying.
Okay.
I think that there definitely is a PR problem. So you could approach that with adverts. You could do a number of things. I think often though, this is about careers more generally as well. Careers education, the ability for schools to get people to come in to talk about it.
True.
To actually, and that's it doesn't necessarily just affect construction. That it affects lots of things, that we're not actually giving young people a good enough flavor of what it is to go into the world of work. I think we probably don't have a big enough focus on that. And so where some of those sort of partnerships work, where employers go into schools and really talk about it, I've spoken to big construction firms, with Kia, for example, who do go in, who partner with colleges, who locally, we've done some work with where we had a college being built as well. So trying to look at that sort of the holistic approach about where does the information come from. I think there's definitely a piece from those that have a really good following. So, I met with On the Tools recently, and they are fantastic, really getting amazing content out that is really appropriate to various different age brackets. And also to people who are in the trade. So you kind of, you're able to be responsive to different audiences. And so I think the challenge has always been the assumption that to go into construction means all I can do is go onto this. It's, it's just a dirty manual job and all that. And actually, that's crazy to me, because there are so many amazing things that you can do. You're also actually leaving a legacy, like something that you leave behind. And then it's looking at the wider set of roles and jobs within that, because obviously you might, as somebody, start on a very particular job in a manual role, but then you might become a site manager. You might decide that you want to go and do a different discipline. You might want to go into quantity surveying and slightly, restudy, retrain. There's the whole area about actually design, the creative process element to it. There's the liaison that needs to be done with, with the clients, with the planning departments. There's a whole raft of different types of jobs that are there. And so I think that with a more coordinated approach and thinking about what's the narrative that's being told and understanding it. So again, understand that from young people, asking that question, well, why do you think that? Where has that come from? When we start to get under the skin of why they think it, we can then start to maybe address it.
Snobbery, but not. Do you know, it's a bit like being a waiter in this country. We're not very good at it. The French are a lot better at doing it. It's serious, high. It's, they go to school and they train properly. It's definitely, it's a really interesting thing. And I think, what you've said is absolutely spot on. It's just about finding also careers leads at schools. They really struggle. My mum is one. I know she struggles to get people in and talk about different careers. And you're so right. It's starting to change the perception. AI. This is one job that maybe AI won't end up taking. Do we sort of need to spin it like that?
Well, it is very interesting, because it is absolutely the job that AI can't take over. And there is a growing sort of understanding that maybe we shouldn't put all our eggs into that one basket. Because the world is a very complex place. And yes, there will be things that dramatically change maybe the way that we approach things. You may find that AI, starts being used in the building industry to speed up, it is already sort of being approached from a government point of view to look at, what information is there? How do we speed up the analysis of planning applications? It might be that you can use that in the sort of assessing raw materials and whether they're more suitable or less suitable. I'm sure there are applications. But fundamentally, AI can't actually put bricks together and build a house. So unless we're going to start, investing huge amounts of money into robots, which isn't going to be a cost-effective way, then we're not going to be there. And so actually people realizing the value of human skill about what it is that is completely different. And so that sort of level of investment and the types of investments now are looking at these industries that are more traditional, that have, plant and machinery, that need people, that are not these sort of slightly ethereal digital concepts at the moment, which actually we're not quite sure where that's landed. It's still hovering at the moment. And so I think that there is a huge opportunity for people to, get themselves a career that isn't going to be redundant. Like it literally can't be. And the changes might be that we start to move away from some of the traditional methods of construction, and therefore there might be retraining along that route, which goes into, more of a manufacturing base, possibly. But I don't think we're going to get there anytime particularly soon, because there's always going to be that transitional point. So the skills of building houses, designing places for people, making sure that they're appropriate to their local communities, like that is always going to be needed. And so making sure that people are not left behind with those skills, but also the realization that isn't where we're at. And in fact, we're in a skills shortage. We need people to be taking those up. I've got a local college like Tamworth College where we've got fantastic courses there, and one of them is the bricklaying course that they do. And I think it's about looking at the responsiveness of those courses. And I've met with the National Housebuilding sort of council and spoken with them about the ways that they're just trying to slightly change the way that the training is provided, so that instead of it taking years to get to that qualification point, how do you get people on site quickly, feeling that they're contributing and have a real role to play? And that's giving them the specific skill set they need for that build, and then building on that. So you're starting with a baseline skill and then continuously adding to it.
And that's ready.
Absolutely. And that's going to mean that people can get out there and right onto site much more quickly, and we can get the houses built that we need in a more responsive way. And it also allows people to understand, well, which bit of it did I really like? Because otherwise you may end up in a course that many years down the line, people are not feeling so engaged. They're not feeling like there's a relationship. So I think being more agile, more responsive to what we need is the way to go. And so these colleges where they are combining the sort of the on-site, almost like an apprenticeship with the learning agenda, is really powerful. And I think
there aren't enough of them.
There aren't enough, no. But the fact that we've, pushed for that we've got many more opening and most of the regions have one is a good start.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people are going to say, I don't want to spend many years
training for this thing.
I'm going to do something else.
Do you know what, as well? We've got one going on right at the minute, Build Academy in Wanstead. And there we had the construction minister come and visit quite recently, actually. And that's a classic example where we've got our members turning up, doing a trade with them, and the students are learning on site, actually having sort of a simulated bathroom, reno, or whatever it may be. And they're absolutely loving it. And they're getting site ready and, getting jobs off the back of it. So it's all about, that sort of stuff, isn't it? Really more of it.
100%. And those people being the ambassadors for what it is that they've got out of it, because, it's all well and good speaking to young people, but you need youngish people also to talk to young people who are saying, look, this is where I'm at. This is what my career progression is going to be. This is what I'm really excited about. That gives young people more sort of confidence, I think, in what they're hearing, because talking to somebody who is sort of, in their later years, who's sort of had their entire career, like that can feel quite alien, I think. It just feels like, well, you've had 30 years. Well, that's not where I am. I felt differently. You don't know what it's like now. And that's fair enough. But actually, those people who are going into the different, trades and different aspects of the construction industry, those people talking to young people, that I think is really crucial, because that's where people go, oh, okay, I hadn't really understood that. I didn't realize that that's what the pay was. I didn't know that's where I could go.
There's a lot of that.
I didn't understand, anything, or, I've never had an exposure to that. So why would I think about doing it? So those are the types of things I think once you can tie it up together, you may be able to sort of break down some of those barriers. And I think there are plenty of women who might go into it, but it's about how it's presented, because you're right, it's often assumed to be very male, and it is. That's a fact. Really a male dominated environment, but that is also because a lot of the trades may also be very physical, so there might be differences in how they would approach certain things. So it's a difference in the types of skills that can be deployed. And therefore, well, if they're not, necessarily going to go into bricklaying or something, well, actually, there's plenty of other things that they can do. Why is it that they wouldn't consider it? Because there's plenty of women who like practical things, who can absolutely go ahead and So I don't think it has to be about the presumption that they're just not interested at all. I think it's about the presentation to women about what those opportunities are. And obviously any women who are in that industry showing, well, this is what I do. This is why I love it. This is the difference. And actually you could approach it from this way or the other. You don't have to, have an assumption about what the trade is about. So I think there's definitely a whole piece there around, women in the construction industry, and certainly, some of the work that's being done, I think is fantastic to bolstering that. And what we want to do as part of the APPG as well is expand some of the sort of work that we do alongside women who are house builders, and why they got into it, and what it is that, they love about it, so that we can actually showcase that and think about how we can interact with those that are trying to get the message out. So it's using those networks to say, we can't and we can't like revolutionize it overnight, but we can start to tackle it and approach it in a way that has meaning and that has impact. But it's like, if you spread yourself too thin and say we're going to solve it all and we're just going to have this campaign that it was, well, not necessarily, it's just not. I mean, I think that's kind of been done before, so it's not an easy answer. No, it is something which many people are passionate about, and I think there is a coordination factor. There is also understanding what is the way to communicate this, because perhaps it hasn't been communicated in the way that was going to land, and so perhaps understanding more about those things that motivate young people, what their values are, what it is that they want for their lives, and therefore why is it that they don't perceive the industry to align to those things?
Yeah.
That's probably how I'd want to start to understand it and hearing direct from them. So, we've got people going into college to study, great, find out why they did. But then why are the people who are not thinking about that, why are they not?
Yeah.
And somewhere between the two probably lies some of the answers.
Exactly, like it's never come up. Or you're right. I mean, it's really well made. Thanks, Sarah. Really good. So we're going to move on to licensing. I know that you have already asked the Department of Business and Trade about licensing a number of times. Obviously, it's something we've massively campaigned for. We did a bit of research last year. 14.3 billion has been lost over the last 5 years to people who've been a victim of a rogue builder. Obviously, the economy's lost out on that. Our members and other reputable builders have had their name tarnished. I mean, first of all, tell me your views on it, and where you are with licensing, and your personal opinion on it.
Yeah,
like that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you imagine that you're a homeowner and you want to get some work done, or you want to, do the fantastic scheme of retrofitting part of your home to make it more, energy efficient, more appropriate to the changing climate, any of those things, you think that when you apply or when you go online that you're going to be met with a whole host of companies that sit underneath this wonderful protective framework. And then they have work done, and then the other side of it, something awful happens, and they realize that there's literally no recourse.
Thank you.
And there's stuck.
No recourse. Non-court system, anything.
So there's literally nothing to do. And there's fantastic TV programs that I remember from growing up, like Cowboy Builders.
Yeah, like Rip Off Britain.
This whole thing has been going on for a very long time and has been left without any resolution. And so what needs to happen if we're going to do any of those types of schemes whereby government money is trying to do the right thing and incentivize improvements to housing stock, help people with their energy bills by enabling them to take grants, loans, etc., then the people doing that work need to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because classically, a new build home is very different to a Victorian home. And if, 30% of our housing stock in this country are older houses, they have a completely different requirement.
Exactly.
And so knowing that who you're getting understands your property, but is also going to put the right products in is essential, because otherwise we end up where we are with this horrendous situation where people's homes are ruined with mold. They've got extreme amounts of damage. Their insurance is a void. And how on earth, the do nothing option was actually better for them, right? Not going down the route of insulating their home, because the awful situation they now find themselves in is so astronomically expensive and complicated. And there are so many houses who have been impacted by, the schemes not being monitored in that way. There being no way of assessing whether these people who are coming into homes to do this type of work with government grants were appropriate, were anything more than just some random person off the street going, I'll give it a go.
A flag once I can build a house. Yeah.
Okay. And so what that does is that tarnishes all of the reputation of everybody working in that industry. And it means that there is this presumption that, it's all going to be terrible.
Yeah.
Maybe I won't do it.
Confidence is really low.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you'll get less people taking up the potential of a scheme because they'll think, I don't want my house to end up like that, because that's what happened last time.
Yep.
And then you will also have the problem that for those companies who do actually do a great job, but could deliver on this and could grow as a result, because again, that's where the skills of the future are going to be in some of these types of initiatives, in the retrofit agenda. So there's a whole area of growth waiting, but you need to know that it has got some regulations around it that mean that it's not going to end up in the same place it has before, with people's homes being ruined and huge amounts of money from people's life savings. Exactly.
We're doing research at the minute to find out, because I've been working on this for a long time with Mark Garnier, who was trying to introduce licensing as private members bill. But all these victims, I wanted to find out, what they'd used to buy that, get their reno, and why they needed it done. A lot of them had ill family members who they had to extend the house for, a sort of reason. They've used their life savings. They've already remortgaged 3 times. They've borrowed, they've had a loan. And it's just, as an MP, I know how difficult it is from Mark's perspective to advise constituents. Have you had any horror stories of rogue builders? And what is the advice you can do? Do you write to the minister? I'm serious, as an MP, I'm interested.
No, it's difficult. So we don't give advice. We're very careful about that. We try to help. We try to, direct to the right and appropriate body, organisation, and sort of steward their complaint, because, you know, usually they have complained to somebody about it, they've got nowhere, and they often come to my office as a last resort, almost like, is there anything you can do? And we would say, we don't know necessarily, but we will try our very best. And in some instances, you can tell quite early on, like, yes, I think there is something that we can raise here. But a lot of this ends up being a legal issue. It means you have to spend money to take somebody to court, and it will be, you know, a small claims court, because it's not criminal, it's civil, and all these complexities. So even there, people are left with nowhere to turn to. And so we've had come through the office, and I've met with some of them, people who, for example, were having their roofs done and insulated again under these schemes, left with, you know, huge amounts of water coming in, problems where, you know, penetrated through
what just ruins the whole house,
and basically, entire rooms, you know, electrics all affected, and we had this happen 3 times to the same person. So every time it would, you know, you've got to go back and fix this, or you need to get somebody else in that's not your company to fix it. So the astronomical stress that puts on somebody, you know, their entire home has been ruined by something that should have been really straightforward and should have been beneficial to them, and instead it's ended up literally as a nightmare. And everything from roofs to driveways to you know, the sort of homes being built in places where there are problems with the water table. It's just not an appropriate place, and so there's a whole host of challenges and issues that people are facing when they're trying to make a decision. And they think this is an area that, quite rightly, is already, you know, monitored, and it comes under,
because everything else is, you know, the financial cost
is it,
everything,
and it's where you find these sort of black holes, which then takes campaigns, you know, like Mark Garnier, like other MPs, raising these issues and saying, look, there's a problem here, and we need to find a resolution to it, because otherwise we have ordinary people's life savings, their, you know, well-earned money going down the drain to cowboys that keep doing it. Because again, they didn't do it once and go, oh, whoops, I'm sorry, your house is ruined. Maybe I need to go and retrain. They just keep doing it.
Phoenixing, isn't it? Where they pretend they've gone bust, close a company. I mean, on that, is there something that can be tightened? I know also it's not government, you know, thing. But...
No, so I mean that's an area that's obviously whether it's construction or anything else, where somebody closes their company to avoid whatever it is that's coming their way. So it is something that we've looked at from a business and trade committee perspective. Absolutely, and it's actually to do with what powers, for example, Companies House has. So before, you know, so in the last year, they've effectively given more powers, and they are sort of enforcement powers. They are the ability to really go into what is happening, because what was being shown was that you could go and find somebody who was a director of 100 different companies. You'd have these front companies. You'd have the same person popping up. You know, you'd have false addresses. Previously, Companies House was literally just a transparency register. They didn't have any powers to do anything about the problem when a listing is clearly false, wrong, illegal, any of those things.
They didn't flag it. They couldn't flag it, or anything.
It wasn't their remit to do it. So it's not that they didn't want to. It's the fact that it didn't sit within their powers to do that. And so it became something that other enforcement agencies would have to pick up if it was something that came across their desk. And exactly. And so then you've also got capacity issues around whether or not they can take that on. So it becomes quite a challenge. So Companies House, like many things at the moment, that the government is looking at, how do these sort of bodies, how do they function, and how could they be functioning better? What is it that could be done? And what is the consistent complaint? And it's, how can you have so many companies that are fake? How is it that you can be somewhere else in the world and set up a company in this country for like 20 quid? You know, it's ridiculous. So it's the ease of which you could set up a company with no checks. You didn't need to go down in person and show any ID. I mean, just slightly mad things when you think about it. But actually, it had not necessarily been abused to the extent that it is now, and particularly where we're in a digital world where they'd almost, somebody that we heard evidence from said, you know, I think they're a victim of their own success, in that Companies House was unique in that it was a very early digitalization of company information. And so there were many other places in the world that don't have that. They just don't.
So people thought, oh, because it's all open, it's safe.
And surely then we can see there's a problem. They need to do something about it because they're the registering body.
Yes.
And in many other instances where you have to register somewhere, they would also have powers. Yes. So that is part of the changes that the government is making, is saying, actually, we are going to give those powers. They are going to be able to work alongside other agencies and actually have some penalties for doing so, and looking at those issues where, the same person keeps popping up.
Because they just do it somewhere else in the country.
Precisely. Yeah. So I'm sure that there will be various tweaks and things that need to change as they learn how the powers are and are not maybe delivering on some of those results. But the fact of the matter is we're now at the point where that can happen. So I do hope that some of that issue where we know that somebody is set up a company, is a cowboy builder, a rogue trader, that they could be flagged, that it would be difficult. And that you could look for those things. And again, that is where, coming back to AI, the types of going through an entire database like that becomes very quickly to look for what's a red flag. Oh, the same address popping up. The same name or the same pattern. They might have given a false name, but some of the other indicators mark it out as being the same. So that enables you to really drill down into where you need to look quicker.
Well, this is what an FME builder is so good, because our vetting team does this. So they will actually do the check on and see, right, that's a red flag. You've been insolvent before. No, you can't be with us.
Yeah.
So we are, as you know, the closest thing to that. And so to have we're sort of halfway there. We were, we should be on the ground doing this and making sure that people are safe, because it's just,
it's
not too far.
And that's what, that's what is so good about being able to say, if there's a licensing scheme, then where does that responsibility then sit?
Yes.
And so that's part of that conversation about saying, absolutely it should, but then many good builders are your members.
Yes.
They are accredited through other organizations. They have a track record. They are showing and demonstrating consistently why it is that they are somebody that you can work with, why you can employ them, why they're safe to work on your home. So giving a better indication to the public, much better education about what to look for, stopping, the ability to just advertise anywhere that they are, without there being some kind of check that actually you need to show that you've got those licenses. So some of that is, again, that communication, that education piece, so that somebody who's thinking about having work done on their home can make a better and more informed decision. And so that is something that you want, that not to be too onerous, too burdensome to have some such license, but actually most of the good people are already doing it. They're already meeting those kind of standards. So it's just agreeing with, the government that if they are going to bring that in, how do they take the right information from organizations like yours to make sure that when it is rolled out, it's done in the best way possible? That means that the good people are going to be pushed to the top and are going to keep that standard high. And the bad people are either going to be flushed out or are going to have to seriously raise their game.
And be better at being badder. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's really interesting. The whole thing is just fascinating. Right, I want to talk to you about 1.5 million homes. So you've said that SME builders are crucial, which we love, to doing that, and they are. What, in your opinion, is the sort of biggest barrier? If you could wave a magic wand, what would you change to sort of get small house builders out there, not competing against sort of Mason, it's all, how would you make it easier for them to be a part of this?
Well, what we've tried to do with the APPG for SME house builders is really get the direct information from them, because there's a whole host of information out there. And then we've sort of set that down as sort of priorities, if you like. And some of that is what we've produced. So I brought along with me today, building Britain's future, how to empower SMEs. So in that, we've surveyed our members. We've asked them about what their top priorities are. And they highlight the classic issue around the speed of planning, because that's the thing that holds up the cash flow. That's the thing that stops everything. It grounds to a halt. If you cannot get the planning permission in the time window, then you're just waiting. We've got examples where it's not just planning, it's also the issue around highways. So the fact that they got the planning permission, they've, been waiting for that for a while, but the only thing that's stopping them has been 2 years of waiting for highways to sign off the access to the site.
Right.
And so they just can't do anything. And so this is something that, again, through the roundtables that we've held in Parliament, we've fed that back to the minister. We've been really lucky that we've had Baroness Taylor come and sit in on our, roundtables and fed that back. And she did say that's really interesting, because actually we were aware of the challenges around, the wider delays. There is a lot that the government is doing to start to assess how to pull those delays back and what types of initiatives that they can implement around, again, this issue of not having enough planners,
not enough staff,
not enough staff. And so, trying to train them. But again, that takes time. So you can't just rely on that. It might take you 3 years at least to become a junior planner. So what do you do in the meantime? Because we don't have 3 years to wait.
Yeah.
So it's looking again at, well, what could you fast track through?
Yeah.
What is it that we could say you assume is okay? How is it that councils could be working with local builders that they know already have a track record? There are ways of doing this. Precisely. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's sort of feeding in the various ideas and saying, look, these are a whole host of ways that you could speed it up and cut the time in different directions that affect different SME builders and their different profiles. So by looking at those and then assessing which ones you can do in the short, mid and the long term, hopefully you're then starting to see that shift, because the new focus that the government has on obviously the speed of planning has meant that they're looking at sites and the challenges that people often cite around needing to deliver the social housing, which obviously sells at a different cost. You need to have the buyers there, and it can impact the viability and the length of time that those houses are sat there and the cash flows and everything. So it becomes a very challenging sort of wholesale problem. And so now with the ability for, Homes England sort of saying, well, actually, we are going to accept this exceptional circumstances effectively on sites. You can apply for that. We're starting to get more nuance, because I think part of the problem was that everything has always been very rigid.
Yeah.
And in some respects, that's, what you want, in that you want there to be standards that you have to meet.
Yeah, to protecting land, whatever.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But what we've seen is that it's not been working.
Yeah.
And it's
too rigid.
It's too rigid. And you haven't got the throughput, and you haven't got the ability for SME builders to build those houses, sell those, get the cash flow to input into the next site. And at a smaller scale, they need a much higher capital ratio to invest.
Yes.
And the only time they unlock that capital is when they sell a house.
Yeah.
So it's not easy if you're then waiting for those things, because you can't start another site because you don't have the cash flow.
Yeah.
You don't have the cash flow.
Just talking to one of our members about last week.
Yeah. So it's, they want to do that, but if they are tied into the current cycle, then that's not possible. So there's also, discussions around, well, how is it that you could open up sites, and can you change the payment terms of how you pay for the land? Can you think about, for example, whether or not you pay for the land after you sell for the house,
or installments? Surely that's quite. So
you think there are different, there are. But so what are those types of things that councils could be looking at potentially on some sites, which is saying, well, obviously you're going to build on the site, so why not build per house? And then, but there are options. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the way it's always been. And so looking at some of the sort of slightly more creative approaches to those challenges around cash flow. Obviously, access to funds has been traditionally very problematic as well, because the rates were very high. You have to put your personal collateral on the line. It's something which the Business and Trade Select Committee have heard evidence on. And that's not just from construction, that's SMEs across the board, which is that if you're being asked to put your home up as collateral, you may not choose to do that if it's going to be a problem. Or you might be being asked to pay sort of like double a bank rate mortgage, whatever that might be. A normal rate of interest is sort of double, triple. And therefore it just becomes like, well, why am I going to do that? Like,
why would I put myself through it?
It's just too much. So we're currently conducting an access to finance inquiry to really understand, what those barriers are and the reality. And again, get those case studies of the actual rates that people have been quoted, the actual terms, because otherwise, there is access to finance. Like, well, define access to finance. Saying that there is a loan available if you wish to pay 15% is technically access to finance. It's whether or not that is realistic, actually affordable to the business, to the organization. So those are some of the things that we're trying to sort of unpack a little bit more, which is go beneath that headline, you can get this. Is it working? What's the reality of it? What do people think? Why wouldn't they take it? And look at, there's an incentive there saying, well, we've increased that. We made £100 million as the government. That's fantastic. That's great. So what we want to know is, how's that going? Are people taking them out? Is that starting to unlock, some of this challenge around this cash flow problem that means they can unlock more sites and get that house building going? So I think it's the taking all of these things and saying, right, what are all of the potential solutions, and providing them and saying, actually, if you could tackle some of these, it's really going to start to make a difference, because most people will say it is always the planning that's slowing everything down. But in some areas that is improving, that is getting better. Not everywhere, because we don't yet still have this single approach to it. And we have got, small sites, 9 or so houses whereby that's being pushed through quicker. That's great. And there's obviously calls to have this medium site classification, because there's a lot of people working in that, up to 50 houses who, again, are still stuffed it to those quite stringent challenges that if you're a larger house builder, your scale means that sort of cost per unit is much less. So it's trying to bring everybody up to a standard where they can, feel a lot calmer, less stressed. We know that people are exiting the house building market every week. They are really, literally. Well, I'm talking about that as the builders themselves.
Yes, exactly.
They literally can't afford to build, or they just cannot get that project. They've been waiting 2 years now, which is crazy. Yeah. And once they're gone, they're gone.
Yeah.
And so the ecosystem of large house builders fulfill a really important function, but they had to start small sometime. They were small once upon a time. They didn't all start massive. So that whole ecosystem of finding who the house builders today who are small, who are ready to grow, how do we grow them? How do we make sure that we support them to build really high quality homes that are responsive to our now ever-changing environment? How do we make sure that they're fit for the future and that our communities have really solid housing going forwards? And how do we look at what that progression is to being a larger house builder that has all of those great principles, but then can do that at a much larger scale to address the chronic housing shortage that we currently have?
And it's just, appalling. Sarah, that was really, really well put. I just want to ask you one last thing. So what is your message? I mean, you've done a pretty good job, I've got to be honest, of telling our members what your message is. But for all of those members out there who are really feeling the squeeze with energy costs, with all the things you've mentioned, what would you say to reassure them, that please keep building, don't be disheartened? What would be your message to our members, who are out there really wanting to build and finding it tricky? What would you like to say to them?
Yes. Well, it is difficult because when people have been in that stressed situation, they are under stress at this point in time, both as a business and as individuals. Sort of saying, hold on, wait, help is coming, isn't necessarily what people are ready to hear. But the conversations that we're having with the house builders through the APPG is very much about saying, we are championing and directing that voice directly into government. You have a pro-house building government. Very, very different to what we had before. And they are slowly but surely, and I hope much more quickly, as we help to identify and encourage them to take slightly bolder steps to make it easier, to unlock some of the barriers, making sure that they're removing consistently those problems. So they are really tearing up and reforming the planning system. The bills, the infrastructure and planning bills that are coming through are really tackling the root causes of a system that just was not working. They are investing that money in making sure that the planners on the ground are coming through, but also that we don't wait for that we actually look at applying technology, applying artificial intelligence to looking at how can we speed up decisions? How can we assist individual humans on the ground to do the good part of their job, which might be the nuance, the decision making, but with something that actually can take away some of the boring, the arduous stuff that traditionally took a long time. How do we get that capacity? That is what the government is looking at and doing. What we have to do is keep showing and keep having those case studies of, look, we're ready to go, we've got this, but this is the problem. We feed those back in through the APPG, through the reports, through the surveys. You don't have to be a member of the APPG, though. That if you're a member of an organization, if you're a member of yours, then feed that into you, because you have conversations consistently with the government about these problems that are affecting members. And so it's about the right intelligence getting to the right people with the encouragement. And that's what's really positive, is saying, look, all these SME house builders, they are on board. They want to build houses. That's great, because so do the government. But what it's about saying is we still need to help show them where there might be something that they're making, what might be a really valid proposal, but actually there are some converse things that could happen because there's a unique issue here that affects an SME differently to a larger house builder. And so it's just being careful that that one size fits all, that blunt instrument that I think we've had previously doesn't end up creeping back in, and that we have a much more agile housing market and a sector that can flourish and grow. Because that is what I want to see. I want, my community and many others to be able to have houses built in, particularly from SME house builders, all those bits of land that you're just going, that's such a waste. Why couldn't there be something there? Yeah. So it's about being really positive and about saying there is help there. You can reach out, you can ask, for whether you are eligible for loans to help with cash flow, whether or not there are organizations and companies that are giving additional advice about where to go for some of that. Sharing that information, that is where the key is. Not feeling like you're on your own, because actually what we're trying to build is a community where information is shared, ideas are shared, where you might end up with somebody going, oh, I didn't realize that you were down the road. Hey, actually, now that this small sites aggregator pilot has, in the future now been rolled out, all the creases ironed out. Yeah. Oh, well, why don't we work together? Those are the types of things that can come from being a community that shares information and ideas. It's very, very difficult when you're building houses on your own as a small SME and feeling like it's just me and just my business and I can't do it. And so reaching out to, whether that's the APPG, the councils, the, various construction bodies like yourself, who actually have teams of people to give advice. Yeah. Go there, get the advice, ask what you can be involved in so that you're not feeling so alone, but also that you're able to take some of the, advice, some of the potential, access to additional support, and really take advantage of the initiatives that the government is doing through its real focus on, its house building fund and through its changes with how it wants to support SME house builders.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sarah, for taking the time to come in and talk to us in the basement. It's been absolutely fantastic hearing all your views. So thank you very, very much. Join us next time in the basement for our next episode. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.